Hey there. Welcome to The Climate Cycle, a podcast focused on Canada's climate tech ecosystem. In each episode, we sit down with founders building climate solutions right here in Canada to better understand the challenges presented by climate change and what we can do about it. Hi, I'm your host, Justin Rice, the founder of Climate Tech Canada. Home retrofits are having a moment. Governments in Ontario and BC have just rolled out billions in funding and incentives for home energy upgrades and heat pumps, and a newly elected federal government is promising to build on the Canada Greener Homes program. But despite all of this funding, adoption is still much slower than it needs to be to hit our climate goals. Retrofits are complex projects with disjointed rebate programs, outdated tools, and a big knowledge gap for homeowners about what's even possible. To explore this, I sat down with Arman Mottaghi, the founder of Properate. Properate is building better infrastructure for home retrofits, including software to help governments deliver tailored, high-impact retrofit programs, clear upgrade plans for homeowners, and updated tools that contractors can use on-site to assess and generate energy models in real time. In our conversation, we talk about what's broken in Canada's retrofit ecosystem, how the end of consumer carbon pricing is changing the cost-benefit conversation for home energy upgrades, how Properate is positioning retrofits not just as an emissions reduction tool or a way to cut your energy bill, but as a way to make your home healthier, more comfortable, and more resilient. We also talk about why Arman chose to bootstrap his business rather than going the VC-backed route. If you're working in housing, energy, or climate tech, or just thinking about your own home, I think you'll learn a lot from this conversation. And now, here's my chat with Arman. Arman, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Justin. This was a while in the book, so I'm very excited to be finally here.
Yeah, same here. I'm glad we could reconnect and set aside some time to talk about what you're working on. So yeah, maybe let's start it off. Could you give us just a quick intro to Properate and the problem that you're tackling?
Yeah, so Properate stands for property rating or proper rating, however you want to say it, but it's a Latin word and it means to speed up. And that's exactly what we want to do when it comes to upgrading homes at scale, doing building energy retrofits towards homes at scale. Now, this is a very niche sounding idea, but I think the general journey towards here was figuring out how big of a problem there is when it comes to building science aspect of the homes that we are living in. I'm a building scientist. That's what I studied in university. And when I tell that to people, they're like, "What is that?" It's not architecture. It's not civil engineering. We do a ton of very foundational important work in our buildings when it comes to making sure they're structurally sound and the materials are fireproof. We do all of those things. But building science specifically is the science of making sure people are healthy and comfortable indoors. When I got into this field, I started to realize that as an industry, we don't have the tools and the capacity to bring building science to the masses. And most of our homes have problems when it comes to that kind of comfort or health inside the indoor environment. Case in point was the heat waves that we have been dealing with across Canada over the last few years. So that's how Properate really came to be, and the problem space showed itself is that we need to scale up the delivery and the usage of building science at a large scale. And the reason we focus on homes is the fact that we have so many homes. Like it's the biggest cohort of buildings. Low-rise residential buildings are the biggest cohort of buildings inside the entire built space portfolio. We tend to really focus on office spaces and flashy downtown buildings. We sometimes forget about the places we sleep in. So that's Properate. That's Properate in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Okay. I'd love to maybe go back to the beginning. So you talk about building science, and this isn't really a field a lot of people maybe know about. What made you pick that field? And then was there a moment that really sparked the idea for Properate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know if you ask people why they picked their field when they were 18 or
Yeah.
20, like what answers you're gonna get. I would just say I kind of got into it without really knowing what I'm getting myself into. When I got into the field, I understood that it's solving very fundamental problems, very, very important things. But inside the academia, you always have this problem of getting out, like making yourself heard for a large audience. People don't read your scientific literature. It's just not meant for the public. The way Properate started was, me taking a stab at the problem around 2017, 2018, and starting from the new construction field. But the kind of market entry, the experiments we did along the way brought us into the world of energy retrofit. We started to grow, and I have an amazing team of people, which, shaped up this company. But what became Properate really was through those, long journeys into, okay, what is it that even matters? When people ask me this question, it's kind of climactic. When you listen to a TED talk, people are like, when I was a kid, or like, I had a moment of inspiration.
Yeah.
I think you could draw a ton of parallels with the personal experience of everybody in our company who has helped shape this, and myself as well. I live in Canada, but I'm originally from Iran, and these countries are in the two opposite ends of the planet. Yet the kind of problems you see, they are the same. I remember, Iran has the one of the highest natural gas deposits on the planet, and it's really cheap to burn it, and yet our home was always cold. Like, we had radiators in every room. They were just like blasting out heat. You couldn't even touch them. They were that warm. Yet, you were feeling like you couldn't walk around comfortably without wrapping a blanket around yourself. At the time, I was like, well, okay, that's how it is. Like, I mean, what else are you going to do? And it took me such a long time to realize the obvious, that, we have to wrap that blanket around the building itself. We haven't been doing such a simple thing. So it's not really a conversation even about fuels or emissions or any of those things. It's just the fact that we're tapping into something that's very fundamental.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess that's what got us into that field of retrofit and ended up here.
That's really interesting. And I think there's the general idea is there is some aha moment, but often it is much more iterative and exploratory and pulling on a thread. And that's how it goes a lot of the time. So I'd love to talk about the retrofit situation, because the picture you described there of, radiators blasting, but the house is still cold. I think that's something that, particularly in older homes, but even in new builds, that's something that people are still running into today. Maybe help us orient to the retrofit experience from that homeowner perspective, because there's obviously the envelope and air sealing, but you've also touched on health and comfort and some of those other dimensions.
Yeah, the biggest thing right now is that we don't know what we don't know. Just like how I was thinking this is normal, I think a lot of people just take it as being normal what they have in their home. Sure, everyone's shower is moldy. Sure, everyone's basement smells damp. Sure, like having condensation on windows is just what happens. We don't think about them as deeply as we should. And we don't also see the importance of a healthy enclosure. I like to put the example of the 3-3-3 rule, which is a survival rule I learned a little while ago. It tells you that if you don't eat the proper food, you're going to perish in 3 weeks. If you don't drink water in 3 days, you're going to perish. But if you don't have the proper air for 3 minutes, right, you're going to perish.
Right.
We tend to think a ton about what we eat and what we drink, but not what we breathe. And again, like, it comes down to just not knowing what is important. Like, if I tell you, proteins and vitamins, you know what I'm talking about. But what is that protein and vitamins in the indoor air, right? That's what we don't know. When I start to talk to people about this, they start to breathe a little bit heavily, and I'm like, that's just normal. That's, you now acknowledge it, you realize it.
Yeah.
So that's the first step. Okay, so we don't know. Sometimes even not knowing, a problem just comes to a head and you have to fix it. Like your furnace is breaking down, or you are, dealt with a cold snap that it just got so bad. You're like, I'm gonna do something about it. It comes down to now taking an action. This is where the other problem is that you don't have a definitive, simple way of figuring out where your problem is, because usually people come with a situation that happened. The house got really cold, or I'm just feeling really stuffed, like my nose is stuffed when I'm at my home. People come to you with a problem, and it's just
Yeah.
like a doctor. You have to understand where the pain is. The second problem with after not knowing is that we don't have good access to those doctors. They do exist, but their knowledge doesn't flow through towards you. So you end up going to your buddy from high school, or some random person you found out of a Google search, and they have one thing to sell you. They might say, okay, now like do this one thing or that other thing, go and replace your furnace or clean up your ducts, because that's the service they sell, and it's not necessarily solving your problem. Home energy retrofits are a sort of thing that you can spend a ton of money into them, and you can totally waste that money, like not have any resolution come out of it. Or you could spend a very small amount of money and exactly fix your problem. The analogy I have for it is, imagine you have a balloon in your hand, in one hand, and you have a duct tape in your other hand, and the balloon has a leak, right? If you stick this duct tape to anywhere other than where the leak is, you're not going to solve the problem, right? So the detection of that problem, like that doctor coming to you with some diagnostics and even figuring out what is wrong with your body, or what is causing you that symptom, that's the second problem. So the landscape right now is dealing with those two things. The way we are coming in is that we are working with local governments, utilities, you name it, to, in the first step, create a lot of education about what is even the importance of building energy assessments and building energy ratings. You talk to people and you lose them the first moment you mention it, but when you talk about all of the important health, comfort, wellness benefits that they are missing out on, it becomes a lot more grounded. And then the second thing is flowing that knowledge, the building science know-how, to the people. Canada happened to be at the time one of the front runners in this field. The landscape of home energy rating in Canada comes from the oil crisis of 1972. And at the time, people started using punch card computers, and everything they had to start to understand home energy rating, and how like you model a building, how you digital twin this building, way ahead of its time. The kind of technology that was being used in Apollo program and in weather forecasting, we used it on buildings. It's such a fascinating field. In the 90s, they were talking about neural networks being used on these modeling stuff, which is way ahead of its time. The problem is that we sort of got stuck with the technical debt from that era. So the people who are coming to your home and doing that objective building energy assessment today, there is a very, very high chance that they are using a software produced by the government of Canada named HOT 2000
Okay.
to do your building energy rating. And HOT 2000, when it came out, it was way ahead of its time. As you can imagine, the 2000 in the name means
Yeah.
that it came out at the time that 2000 was way forward in the future. But for our today's needs, it has all the good parts of being able to give you a very clear rating and picture of where your home is, but it's not really tuned to the kind of scale up needs we have. We have to take this to millions and millions of homes. And we're just not getting a very efficient and effective way of going in there.
Yeah.
So that's how we solve the second problem, is that we are creating software that is compatible with that 40, 50-year-old punch card computer process. Believe it or not, we have gone into a lot of deep research and reading some really old papers and trying to convert them into the kind of software that can go in the hands of everybody. Hopefully is going to solve more problems, but even to this day, this is now in the hands of tens of thousands of people, and they have access to them.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like problem one is kind of, we don't know what we don't know. That kind
Yes.
of almost that band-aid approach to, oh, I'll, fix my windows or whatever, instead of looking at the whole system. And then also the tools that we're actually using are outdated
Yeah.
from decades ago, and we've moved on. I'd love to talk about the solutions that Properate's developed for this. You mentioned there's the homeowner aspect, the contractor aspect, but also the government side of this. Could you talk about how those pieces kind of work together and how you're thinking about those distinct customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we do to solve a problem is to break it down. And it quickly turns out that there is not one size fits all solution. On one end of the spectrum, you have governments who just want to understand what is the kind of effective programming or effective messaging that they need to have to get to the homeowners. Like, what kind of homes do we have out there? What problems are they dealing with? There's a surprising amount of useful information that we haven't tapped into when it comes to understanding our homes, our built spaces. For example, our governments or our utilities, they fly airplanes that take aerial LiDAR. Over 60% of Canadian population have aerial LiDAR data scan, which is used for all kinds of land surveying, fire resilience measures, forestry management, etc., etc. But nobody has thought to grab that data and think, okay, so these are the building features we have inside our community or neighborhood. Same goes with looking at different climate regions, different kind of weather patterns, climate patterns. The first product we have is called Properate Homes. This is a map-based product that gives governments virtual rating. Virtual rating means there is no homeowner involvement, and you can get a picture of where this home is with some degree of confidence. And you can see the cohorts of the buildings that have a shared problem, or let's say shared potential for doing energy upgrades. That will help you create programs that are more effective and speaks to the audience that can actually use them, as opposed to going and creating sort of one size fits all programs. Billions of dollars is going into the kind of retrofit programs, but the way these programs get distributed is that they say, we give you a maximum of so many thousands of dollars, let's say 5,000. You can spend $1,000 on your roof, you can spend $2,000 on your window, so and so. The challenge is that it turns out that you quickly max out in the area that you have to be investing more on, because your home can
Right.
really benefit from that one thing, while the other home can really benefit from the other thing. So it's not effective fund. So Properate Maps really helps with that problem. Then we get into homeowner involvement. So when you have the homeowners around, you can ask a few questions from them that is privacy respecting, but also makes your energy models a lot more accurate. So if, let's say, in our Properate Maps, we have a fuzzy picture of the home and what the occupants could say about it. In homes, we ask them a number of questions that they don't even need to get up their seat to answer. These are very simple questions like, what kind of foundation do you have? How deep in the ground the foundation is? Have you made any changes to your home in the last 10 years? One very important thing about this kind of rating is that we are not asking them how long of showers they take, or
Okay. Yeah.
what kind of food they cook, because we are not talking about the things that are temporal. We are talking about their home as an asset. If they are living in a home that has a newborn in it, they will have higher energy consumption. It doesn't mean they are doing anything wrong. They're just living their life. But we want to create the kind of lifestyle support that is just in the best way possible to them. So the way this is Properate Homes, when you answer your questions, then you get a report that is also asset based. So it talks about your home as an objective thing, that is, this is how efficient your home is, this is how much emissions you have, and then these are the upgrades that we think are right for your home. So we could create a package that is what we call a house as a system, which is that holistic, stick the duct tape in the right place of the balloon sort of process. So we say, okay, we think these are the areas where they could use an upgrade. These are the upgrade. This is how the upgrade should cost. These are the rebates that you could be getting for this upgrade. These are the health benefits. So it's a very comprehensive report, and it engages people. When we have people engaged, then it's time to take the next step. Keep in mind that with Properate Homes, we haven't seen the home yet. Like, we haven't been there. So there the time is to bring in the industry, the people who are energy advising, or the contractors, the folks who are going to be there and make decisions. This is our newest product coming in, which is called Properate Stride. And Stride is a mobile app that uses the LiDAR sensor on the phones for iPhones and iPads to scan the building, automatically detect its features, and create the energy model on the side with the maximum level of accuracy.
Okay.
So then we go, full level of detail for the home, and that's the time for you to make decision. From the maps to homes to Stride, this fuzzy picture of the home is getting clearer. But also keep in mind that it's a ramp for people to start making decisions. Before we had all of these technologies, you could get somebody to come to your home, but it would be $500, $600. And people are having a lot of thoughts about going there in the first place. They just want to know if their home is one of the 50, 60% of the homes that have a low hanging fruit. Or is there like something that they need to even think about before getting all of that processes started? So not just like a kind of a data ramp, but also a engagement ramp. When you go from a simple engagement, quick results, to now let's take a next step and get somebody in the home and get the results in. So far, this process has been very helpful. The work we have done so far has been between maps and homes. So, for example, in the Okanagan, we had the map, but also the map was public. So you would go on the map and you would see your home and be like, okay, well, I want to see what's going on. So you would click on it, and then we would take you to the homes interface. The work you did on the homes, it made the map more accurate as well. It was like a feedback loop that we think is going to be very pivotal to get every home in Canada to be energy efficient and towards the health and well-being of the people who live inside it.
Yeah. If I'm understanding it correctly, it sounds like the local municipality or utility is kind of the entry point, and you're working with them to create a program for an entire community, and then that drills down into the people within that community and start engaging with the survey and filling that out. Is that kind of how the model works? Because other models, it's more you're an individual homeowner and it's up to you to go out and find the resources and do it for yourself.
Yeah, our model is to try to work with the resources that exist right now as much as possible. The model for maps and homes is a government/utility focused model, because they are the ones who are spending resources on fixing these problems, and they don't have the most effective ways of dealing with these issues. But with Stride, we are moving more towards directly working with contractors, getting them signed up into the platforms, getting the benefits that way. So we're trying to have more market reach with different kind of tools the way we are envisioning it. I think governments in general are important because you also have the methodology of energy rating. When I come to you and I say, I think your home is 110 gigajoules of energy usage per year. A, you don't know what the heck is a gigajoule. And B, you don't know where that 110 is coming from. And if I tell you, trust me, I am the one who is telling you, and then somebody else comes to you and says, no, you know what, it's actually like 61, not 110. And you're like, well, this company says one thing and the other one. So there is a lot of coordination work that the federal government
Yeah.
is doing, and they have to keep doing, which is coming into an umbrella that they call it the National Approach to Home Labeling, or NAHL. I hope that I haven't butchered their name, but that's the abbreviation. It's important work that they're doing, but being beholden to the governments is also something that we want to avoid as much as possible, because they have to be slow and methodic, and we are the ones who have to open up avenues and show what is really possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to kind of be engaged in both ends of that spectrum. Before we go further, I'd love to maybe just zoom out a little bit and talk about why this really matters, both from the emissions aspect of it and then just like day-to-day comfort.
Yeah. So let's say you have a house, somewhere in Canada, you have somewhere between less than 1 tons all the way to maybe 15 tons of carbon emissions every year. It's not a small amount. In fact, if you do an energy retrofit of this home and you do it at scale, even you do it in the hundreds, it's going to be a significant amount of emission reduction that is created by this. Unfortunately, we don't tend to focus on the role of low-rise buildings like single-family homes and townhouses when it comes to reducing emissions. We know that the construction industry and the built space is one of the biggest emitters. We also know, according to the modeling by MIT and folks, that reducing emissions, aggressively reducing emissions in the built space, has the single largest impact in the projected temperature reduction. So zero 0.4 degrees Celsius is going to be affected by just like being really aggressive in cutting emissions from the buildings. But when we talk about buildings, people usually think about the office towers in downtown, right? Or they think about those high-rise buildings. But the downtown core is just a small amount of our built space. In fact, if I were to ask you, how much even in the residential space, let's go there, how much of the square footage built do you think are high rises?
Well, I would guess 25%.
The data I have is a little bit old, the latest data we have, but it was 3.6%.
No way. Wow.
Yeah, we tend to over represent and understand the larger buildings, and
Yeah.
we tend to forget about the long tail of smaller buildings we have built. So the kind of uninteresting end of the emissions market, and I'd say uninteresting in quotes, I think actually is fascinating, is those low-rise residential homes. So that's the big impact in terms of climate. Now, when it comes to health, we spend most of our time indoors. At least we sleep there. And that's a third of your day. The rest of that, the time you're spending in your different spaces, you're breathing the air inside that sometimes has volatile compounds, sometimes it's not ventilated really effectively. So your brain is not functioning as smoothly and as well as it should. But on the other aspect of it, this home is the biggest investment for a lot of people in their lifetime.
Right.
When we talk about health and comfort indoors, it's not like it's just that's what it is. There is one right way to get everything in the building sorted out, and then many wrong ways. And when you do it the right way, it doesn't mean you're just going to be more comfortable and you are going to have a lower energy bill, but it's also that your home is going to be more durable. Because when we think about, for example, the air tightness in the building, or like the leakage you have, when moisture comes in, air can come in, that's also a path for mold growth inside your walls. And the mold wants to populate. So it's going to create airborne particles for you that you're going to breathe in, and it's going to give you especially for kids, for elderly, and for adults. Many times it causes different symptoms or development or health issues. So when you fix that problem, you also fix something else. And when you fix that other thing, you're also improving your building's durability, because then that path of leakage is not going to allow moisture to come in and start eating your studs, cause all kinds of problems down the road. It's a very integral part of our life to figure out how our homes work and operate, and then the effects you have to your health, to your investment you have made, even if you are renting, and the longevity of you being able to live in that space is massive.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear both the climate impact is significant and overlooked and the health aspect, because it's not necessarily visible. It's maybe not something you're thinking about every day, but it's all around you. Maybe we can shift gears a bit and talk about adoption. One of the things I'm really interested in is the consumer carbon price. We've had that in place for several years. Recently was eliminated by the federal government. How have you seen consumer carbon pricing shaping decisions when it was in place? And what impact does it going away have on adoption?
I like a lot of people. I think there should be a price on when we are polluting, and
Hmm.
there should be a price on the resources we are extracting. I don't have any question there. I think when you have a system that is broken in multiple ways, but it's still a system, when you fix one part of it, the rest of the system is operating even more ineffectively until it's fixed, right? It's like a kind of a really old code that runs, and it runs with the things it has, and then you fix one thing and it breaks down. It
Right.
doesn't mean you have done something wrong. It means that the kind of intervention you have made was maybe untimely or incorrect. I see that we need to do a lot more work when it comes to the ABCD of allowing people to have more efficient homes, essentially. And then we can think about, okay, how do we ingrain that into the economics of the energy upgrades? The way we were looking at the carbon pricing, it showed a difference when it came to the cost of not taking action. We had a
Okay.
graph in our reports that said, you are going to spend somewhere around six, seven, $10,000 for just heating and cooling your home over the next so many years. Why don't you spend that money today and just eliminate that need and also live with the benefits? Now, if you don't have a pricing on the pollution, then that's a smaller margin to talk about. But in the meantime, the return on investment is not the kind of point we have to make when it comes to home energy retrofits. If I want to go back to the example of the 333 rule, and you know what you're putting inside your body versus what kind of air you're breathing in. If somebody tells you this kind of diet is more healthy for you and it's more tuned to your metabolism, do you ask them what is the return on investment for you?
Right.
You don't, right? It's like we are framing the conversation in the wrong ways. And I think we first have to come in, solve those two problems, right? That we talked about in the beginning, is that we have to understand what the importance is, and we have to have the experts right there
Mm.
to answer the questions. Then when we have those things figured out, I think there is a chance to come in and say, you know what, the kind of inefficiencies that we have inside the system could maybe have an economic conversations to be had about like pricing them in and fixing the issues. I don't really think the kind of changes that are happening are going to stop the movement. I think in 10 years from now, we are going to look at how much knowledge there was around the issues of indoor air quality and comfort. And we are going to look at ourselves in dismay. Just like how there was a time that people used to smoke on airplanes.
Right. Really use
You
lead
look at
paint.
it, it was normalized, like everybody was doing it, but now you look at it and you're like, man, that was so clueless. We were all so clueless. I think it's going to happen in that sense for home. So I
Mm.
think the change is not going to go anywhere. Of course, it's sad that there is now less funding that could go into the kind of environmental initiatives that could make that happen. But maybe it's a wake up call for us to talk less about the dollar figures and return on investment, and really talk about what matters to people, which is, getting an improved, proper, better lifestyle and something that's good for their family.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Do you find that the financial aspect of a retrofit and those home improvements, like the impact of it, is overstated? Because it seems like one of the main barriers that we often talk about or focus on is kind of upfront price tag. Do you find that it's an overstated barrier, or it really is a significant obstacle for people to overcome?
I think it's an overstated barrier
Hmm.
for sure. We go into the conversation talking about return on investment, and then people are like, okay, well, I guess I have to care about the return on investment. We make the mistake of communicating the wrong values and not communicating the importance of doing something. People make all kinds of financial decisions, and I'm not gonna just like sugarcoat it and say it's a light financial decision. No, it's an important thing. But when you see the kind of research we have done, that some homes, you can cut their emissions by more than 50% with less than $20,000. Yet the rebates program totally missed these homes because they're not spending enough money in one category to be eligible for one thing or another. And the rest of us also don't really have a lens. Without any kind of energy rating and energy assessment, we don't have a lens to see, okay, these homes have a ton of potential. There are financial barriers for sure to get this in the hands of more people. I don't think that's the main barrier. I think when you look at why somebody makes a decision to improve their home, if I want to dream and say they have the main understanding of what the values are, or we can convey the understanding of what the values are, then you have an equation. That if the equation is in the black or is in the green, you are great. Like you get the decision, and if it's in the red, they won't. Rebates, return on investment are a part of that equation, and they should be a part of that equation. But the bigger part of that is the kind of living conditions you will have, the improved living conditions you will have after you go through with the upgrade. You also will have a more reliable, equipment. Let's say your furnace is on its last leg. You don't have to have some emergency fix, so you're avoiding some extra costs in the
Mm,
future. And a lot of people are also, concerned about how bad the heat waves are going to get. These
yeah.
these are the sort of things that we can clearly answer. So when we provide a stride assessment for somebody, we can clearly answer the question by saying, according to this future modeling, these are the kind of conditions, that this is the size of the mechanical system you will be able to get. So that clarity is the last part of that equation that puts you in a place where you can say, yeah, this is a good decision to make.
Interesting. Yeah, it's such a more holistic decision to be made, and I think it's a more holistic approach to think about your values and kind of the lifestyle that you want in your house, where you're spending that majority of your time, and that as a starting point, as opposed to only the am I on the red or black in that conversation. I'd love to spend some time and talk about how you're building this business, because we spoke earlier about how you're approaching the company beyond sort of the typical VC backed model. And I know this is something that you've also written about and talked about a little bit. Could you talk about that decision and what that means for the business, and why you took this path?
Yeah, a lot of the things I've told you that we sort of ended up being where we ended up. You would think that I am just going with the flow and really have no control over anything, and I don't know how true that is. But the conversation about our funding and business model is sort of the same thing. When I started the work, and even much before that, I was really interested in the topic of startups. And every time somebody talked about the startups, they said, you have to go in front of investors and do VC funding. You have to go angel investors, find them. Long story short, because that seemed like the conventional knowledge, starting Properate, we started to seek venture capital and angel investing early on. And we got really little traction with that. I think there is trends that appear in the industry and they go away, and we weren't like trendy, or maybe we weren't like communicating our value really well. But in the meantime, we found that it was a lot easier to just find incredible customers, people who were willing to put their money into the work, help us develop the platform, and answer the tough questions. And kind of naturally, we stopped having those investor conversations and started having more of the client work and making money. And you have seen me, as you mentioned, I've been on some of the Vancouver Tech Journal and Globe and Mail, and I don't exactly know how I became this face of bootstrap business, but I generally think it's really great that our company is not beholden to anybody else other than our customers and our employees. The fact that we have sustainable cash flow operation with bootstrapping, I think it's incredible. I don't want to frame it as I made a decision that had some negatives or positives. This was just the best outcome possible. Because like even when you go to investors, you are learning how to sell investors, basically sell to them, and then you have to learn how to talk to customers. Like it's another way, and the goal is to eventually make money. So we are there by just hopping one step. I think bootstrapping is really overlooked in Canadian innovation. We create this picture of this being slower and more burdensome, and I don't really think that's the case. I think it has been such a great journey of just like understanding that you can just make money, you can just do good work and you can make money. And I wish I could take the time back that I spent creating a projection for what kind of headcount growth we are going to have in 3 years, and it going into some like fund and never like seeing the light of day again.
Yeah.
And instead focus on the customers.
Hmm.
Now, in the future, will we raise funds? Maybe. I'm not the person who rule anything out, but in general, we have been growing pretty rapidly. We have been having a very wholesome, great work environment. Hopefully, everyone can attest to that. And that has all been with just like bootstrap. We're just going to customers and selling the quote unquote old fashioned way. The kind of thing that I really didn't hear when I was looking at the startup materials, and I hope more people talk about this for new founders, give them as an avenue that you can make this happen for sure.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And how have you found it impacting how you build the business? Because I think one of the things that the venture model, really focuses on is scale, and you can kind of almost like brute force disruption in some cases, but there's trade offs to that. Like it that scale requires other things. How is this decision kind of shaped how you think about building this business?
I think in clean tech, it's very different. And I think in general, 2025 is very different than the dawn of the venture capital days in 2007 to 2009. The days that, Y Combinator would like, put like Uber and Dropbox and Airbnb, like these companies coming in. Because at the time you had a lot of open space and this quote unquote disruption. You needed people who were aggressive when it came to making impact. I always kind of find it funny when they talk about product market fit, because all of these products, they kind of bent the market to fit their product, which was totally the other way around. I think when it comes to clean tech, we just have a ton of these problems like the ones we are talking about. Is that there is this punch card computer codes and this like MS-DOS like era technologies, and there is this modern day need, and they kind of speak to each other but not really. And what you really have to do is to go and do the methodic laborious work to get these two talking to each other and also make it really engaging and interesting. Is that something that would get solved with having three headquarters in three continents? I don't think so. I think especially today with like how much you see it's becoming vibe coding and all of the just online presence of people and working remotely, it's much easier to do something that a 50-person company could do 10 years ago with just five people. So if you want to make impact, I think I would really focus on like being light and being everywhere at the same time, as opposed to like thinking about this like big disruptive technology that's going to come in and make everybody so much more happier. It's really around like taking time and solving the problem. And I think that's especially true in clean tech.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I think it's a good option for folks to be aware of. If you're doing, say, like, a batteries startup, maybe you have like higher capital costs or something.
Yeah, of
Depending,
course.
I think, to think about your business and what are the options available to you, and knowing that there are multiple pathways out there, I think is a really helpful addition into the conversation. Drawing on that, I'd love to hear about what growth looks like for the company today, and kind of like what's coming up in the next couple of years. Like, what are you focused on, or some of those growth levers that you're pulling?
Yeah, so it's all around that vision of like increasing the number of retrofits, helping people know more and learn more. Our main focus right now is on two approaches. The first one is to get the technology in the hands of more, governments, enterprises, financial sector, utilities, whatever you would name it. But the other avenue is Stride. So, Homes and Maps are taking care of that enterprise part of things. Stride, the mobile app, it quickly went from being a totally sci-fi idea into something that just became real. And we are right now at the later stages of getting this, all of the moving pieces together, creating a tool that is totally eliminating the office work for the people who are sizing mechanical systems and hopefully soon the people who are energy advising. I think that's gonna be very, very impactful. And I'm hoping that it's gonna start to really quickly get into the hands of everybody who is doing their installation of mechanical system, or they wanna just like get some rebate programs. They want to know more about them, or just like doing an energy upgrade in their homes. And I'm hoping that more people will start to think about the walls inside the home as opposed to the countertop, the kitchen countertop.
Right.
And not that the two things are at odds with each other, but it's like when it comes to your home, you have more things that you know about. In the short slash midterm, objective of us is to get Stride in the market, talk to the folks who are visiting people's homes a lot, getting their involvement with the development of this tool in a direction that just can be scaled up to as many homes as possible, and creating that cohort of people who are establishing this message, preaching the building science of everything. And in the longer term, I would like to see a connected industry, both in new construction and retrofit, in a way that every step is leading to another one, and every follow-up step, even when your work is done, is going to give you the kind of next actions you're going to take. Like, let's say you have done one thing about your home, and then you get a sheet that's like, okay, whenever your hot water system has started to act up, give this number a call, right? And they know what to do. So a very connected system, a roadmap of getting every home to green in the next 20 years all around Canada. Each home one step at a time, each home somewhere inside that journey.
Yeah.
But that's really my long-term vision, is that we just create these improvement plans and we follow through with them. I don't want to just talk about it in terms of the consumer side of things. This is going to be one of the biggest workforce development enablers in the country, just creating jobs and opportunities for people who are coming into this industry, gaining equitable payment while doing something that is important, and in a working condition that is helping growth and innovation. The kind of workforce you need to deliver retrofits at scale is huge, it's enormous, and it's going to help create a lot of really interesting economic opportunities for folks. That's what I'm excited about as well.
That's really exciting. Cool. Well, I want to wrap up with a quick rapid fire for you.
Cool.
Doesn't need to be too serious, put too much thought into it. First one, is there a book that you read recently or a favorite that you'd recommend to folks listening?
There's a book called The Stuff Matters.
Okay.
It's really fascinating book about materials,
Okay.
and things. It has a chapter on chocolate that I find absolutely fascinating, but it goes into all kinds of material engineering. It's not a building science specifically related book, but a lot of our work has to do with materials as well. So yeah, I think that's the first one that came to my mind.
That's
Stuff
perfect.
Matters.
And then if you could snap your fingers and change one thing about the climate tech ecosystem in Canada, what would it be?
We touched on it, but the fact that I think our funding models, the kind of advice we are giving new founders, I think it's really in the opposite direction of where I see a sustainable, resilient climate tech company is going to be. And I'm hoping that when we reduce that amount of showman entrepreneurship, like people ask me how many times I've been on the Shark Tank, and I find that to be such a ridiculous
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
notion. Like reducing that like kind of showman aspect of the conversation is going to enable more new voices to come in the industry as well. People who, if just been given the right kind of advice, they are going to make everything better for all of us.
Awesome. And then last one is, and maybe this overlaps a bit, but what's a piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to start their own climate venture?
Apart from that, I always have this analogy that starting a business is like you have 10 baskets, but you only have 3 eggs. So one basket could be marketing, one basket could be product development, one basket could be doing your taxes, the stuff that you absolutely have to do. Where else would you put on your eggs? And I think that's the important piece is what you say no to as opposed to what you say yes to. Focus on the things like I said, like, Y Combinator time has passed or whatever, but I think it's a lot of good advice to be learned from the stuff they say. We had the weirdest looking website for the longest time. We didn't have any kind of content or whatever, but when you have the basics, the ABCD done, then you get a superstar UX designer and really great developers who are going to do that thing. Like making something look pretty is an industry that has already been established. Figuring out how to talk to homeowners about their upgrade is not an industry that has already been established. So I would say focus those eggs in the baskets that are the most meaningful to the long-term vision of your
Mhm.
company. And a lot of people will tell you that you have to put you have to fill other baskets, especially, advisors that are coming, from their sphere, their own sphere. They know how to like solve one problem. So they focus on that. But say a resounding no and focus on the one or two things that make sense. The rest will come forward when you have the resources.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Perfect. Well, Arman, thanks so much for spending some time with us. I'm really glad we got this chance to talk.
Yeah, likewise. I love your work, Justin. And yeah, really, I'm really excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It would mean a lot and helps grow the show. To stay in the loop on Canadian climate tech news, recent fundraising, job postings, events, and more, subscribe to the Climate Tech Canada newsletter on our website. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.